No one could handle billionaire Victoria Hayes anymore. After a devastating car accident left her paralyzed from the waist down, she became known throughout Seattle as the impossible employer. Professional nurses, therapists, and private caregivers came and went every few days. Some couldn't tolerate her cold attitude, while others walked away after endless criticism and impossible expectations. The mansion, once filled with laughter and business celebrations, had become painfully quiet. Everyone believed Victoria had pushed away the last people who truly cared about her, and no amount of money seemed enough to convince anyone to stay. Daniel Brooks wasn't looking for an easy job. As a 38-year-old single father, life had already taught him that nothing worthwhile came without sacrifice. 3 years earlier, his wife, Rachel, had lost her battle with cancer, leaving him alone to raise their 8-year-old son, Liam. Between paying the mortgage, school expenses, and medical bills left behind, Daniel worked 2 part-time jobs that barely covered their needs. When he saw an advertisement for a full-time caregiver offering a generous salary, he ignored the warnings from everyone who knew Victoria's reputation. He simply hoped this opportunity would give Liam the stable future he deserved. On his first morning, Daniel arrived at the enormous estate, carrying nothing more than a notebook and quiet confidence. The house manager greeted him with sympathy before whispering, "You're the 23rd caregiver this year." Daniel smiled politely and walked inside. Victoria sat near the living room window, staring at the rain without acknowledging him. When he introduced himself, she barely glanced in his direction. "Don't waste your energy trying to impress me," she said coldly. "You'll quit before next Friday like everyone else." Daniel calmly replied, "I'm here to do my job, not win a popularity contest." For the first time in weeks, someone answered her honestly instead of nervously apologizing. The days were exhausting. Victoria criticized nearly everything Daniel did. If breakfast arrived 1 minute late, she complained. If he adjusted her wheelchair too quickly, she frowned. She rarely said thank you and often dismissed friendly conversation with silence. Yet Daniel never argued. Instead, he completed every task carefully and treated her with the same respect he would offer anyone else. He understood that pain often disguised itself as anger, and experience had taught him not to judge people during the worst seasons of their lives. One afternoon, while organizing financial documents in Victoria's home office, Daniel noticed something unusual. Among expensive awards, crystal trophies, and framed magazine covers stood a single family photograph. It showed Victoria smiling beside a young boy no older than 7. The child's bright eyes and crooked grin instantly reminded Daniel of Liam. Before he could look away, Victoria quietly entered the room. She immediately picked up the frame and turned it face down. Her confident expression disappeared, replaced by sadness that words couldn't hide. "Please don't ask about him," she whispered before leaving the office. Daniel respected her request, but he couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. Unlike everyone else, he realized Victoria's bitterness wasn't caused by wealth or pride. It came from a wound much deeper than her physical disability. Instead of asking questions, he continued treating her with patience. Every morning, he greeted her with kindness. Every evening, he wished her good night, expecting nothing in return. Gradually, the sharpness in her voice softened, although she still kept everyone at an emotional distance. Several weeks later, Daniel had no choice but to bring Liam to work after school because the babysitter canceled unexpectedly. Nervous about Victoria's reaction, he introduced his son and apologized for the inconvenience. To his surprise, Victoria didn't object. Liam politely thanked her for allowing him to stay and quietly completed his homework in the library. Later, he accidentally dropped a book, then laughed at himself while trying to pick it up. The cheerful sound echoed through the silent mansion like music that hadn't been heard in years. Victoria watched from the hallway, unable to hide the tears forming in her eyes. That evening, after Liam had gone home, Victoria finally broke her silence. She asked Daniel to bring the photograph from her office. Holding it gently, she stared at the smiling boy for several moments before speaking. "His name was Ethan," she said. "He was my son." Her voice trembled as she explained that years earlier they had been driving home from his baseball game when another driver ran a red light. Ethan didn't survive the crash. Victoria lived, but the accident left her permanently paralyzed. "Everyone told me I was lucky to be alive," she whispered. "I never felt lucky again." Daniel listened quietly without interrupting. When she finished, he shared his own story. He told her about Rachel's illness, the nights spent in hospital rooms, and the overwhelming fear of raising Liam alone after her passing. "For a long time," he admitted, "I believed shutting people out would protect me from losing anyone else. Then my son reminded me that love always carries risk, but living without it is far more painful." Victoria looked at him silently, realizing someone finally understood the loneliness she had hidden behind anger for so many years. From that day forward, small changes began transforming the mansion. Victoria invited Liam to visit every Friday after school. Together they played board games, read adventure novels, and laughed over simple jokes. Daniel noticed she smiled more often and complained less. She even began attending physical therapy again after refusing it for nearly a year. Although she still couldn't walk, she slowly regained something even more valuable: hope. The employees who once feared entering her office now found themselves welcomed with genuine appreciation instead of criticism. 6 months later, Victoria announced a new project that surprised the entire business community. She established the Ethan Hayes Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping families caring for disabled loved ones and children who had lost a parent. She personally appointed Daniel as executive director, insisting no resume could match the compassion he demonstrated every day. Together, they built programs that provided financial assistance, counseling, and educational support to thousands of struggling families across the United States. On Ethan's birthday, Victoria placed his photograph back on her office desk, this time facing proudly toward the room instead of hidden from view. Standing beside Daniel and Liam, she smiled through grateful tears. "I thought healing meant forgetting," she quietly said. "Now I know healing means carrying love forward." Daniel looked at Liam, who was laughing while chasing the family's new golden retriever across the garden, and realized that the greatest miracles rarely come through wealth or success. They begin with compassion, patience, and the courage to see the person behind the pain. Sometimes all it takes to change a broken life is one photograph, one conversation, and one person willing to stay when everyone else chooses to leave.